immediate surrender is now demanded. It's no longer about discreet negotiations or diplomatic warnings. The United Kingdom and France have removed their masks and are pushing Zelensky toward the only door left: surrender. There is no room for extension, and peace comes with conditions. The most obvious one is territorial loss. How much longer can the Ukrainian president hold on? Who else will betray him, and what will he do when there are no allies left by his side? Stay with us until the end, because what you're about to hear could change your view on global power. We'll give you the details you need to understand what's really happening and stay one step ahead. This is News for Dummies, where we explain everything to foster your critical understanding of current events. Zelensky will lose everything. The curtain has begun to fall on the illusionary spectacle that President Zelensky insisted on selling to his people and the world. From Paris and London comes the message he never wanted to hear: the time for fantasy is over. The United Kingdom and France, his former backers, are now open to a scenario where Ukraine accepts the loss of its current territories. The revelation, published by the Wall Street Journal, is more than just a diplomatic shift. It is a confirmation that Zelensky will lose everything. According to sources cited by the newspaper, London and Paris have openly suggested they could accept a resolution of the conflict where Russia formally controls the occupied territories. No more endless weapons, no more blank checks, no more empty promises, only an orderly exit to avoid aggravating the inevitable Russian victory. The most brutal part is that this betrayal doesn't come from Moscow, it comes from his own allies, who are now pushing him to the brink. The wear-and-tear strategy, sustained for more than 2 years, has reached its limit. Kiev no longer has the troops or the weapons needed to hold positions. The front lines have shifted repeatedly, and in the opposite direction of Zelensky's speeches. Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Crimea are under Russian control, and there is no indication the situation will change. Moscow has made it clear: if Ukraine wants peace, it must completely withdraw its troops from these regions and recognize them as part of the Russian Federation. There is no room for more negotiations, surrender is the only option left. On the other hand, Zelensky has tried to maintain the illusion that he still has options, but even Ukrainian public opinion, according to the Wall Street Journal, is starting to admit the need for territorial concessions. The toll has been profound. Casualty figures are catastrophic, Russian attacks have not ceased, and the economy is in ruins. Western promises evaporate in the headlines while Russian troops consolidate their positions with surgical precision. The mirage of total reconquest is dead, but only the Ukrainian president refuses to acknowledge it. From Moscow, the demands have been constant and blunt. Not only must Russian sovereignty over the incorporated territories be recognized, but Ukraine must also guarantee its neutrality, non-alignment militarily, nuclear disarmament, and demilitarization. In other words, the country must stop being a puppet of NATO. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been clear: we see no room for compromise. The discussion is being carried out with an openly hostile purpose. Words that sum up Moscow's position with clarity. The New York Post revealed that U.S. officials admitted that Kiev is willing to cede 20% of its territory if it is recognized as de facto control, rather than a permanent concession. But even that does not satisfy Russia. For the Kremlin, anything outside its conditions will be seen as mockery, and as demonstrated by the Russian army on the battlefield, patience is running thin. Every day that passes, drones, missiles, and tactical offensives advance. Ukraine's allies are retreating politically. The brutal, unembellished reality is that Zelensky has become an obstacle. He is no longer useful to his allies. France and the United Kingdom have made it clear. In fact, the possibility of Kiev remaining inflexible against Russia has become a nuisance. As long as the conflict continues, Europe will continue to pay the price with an energy, financial, and diplomatic crisis. Mehran and Starmer understand this perfectly. Support for Ukraine has become an electoral and economic burden, and they are no longer willing to carry it. Western diplomacy has begun to reorganize itself, with Ukraine no longer at the center. Unconditional support speeches have been replaced with calls for strategic realism. Now, discussions focus on current lines of control, security guarantees, and tacit recognitions. The language of surrender has taken root in Brussels and London. Since the beginning of the special military operation, Russia has maintained a consistent stance. Its objective is not just symbolic victory but a transformation of the geopolitical map of Eastern Europe. This goal is being pursued through a combination of military force, diplomacy, and strategic consistency, rather than mere propaganda. The most ironic element is that Zelensky believed his alignment with Western powers would shield him from harm. He thought that following the directives from Washington and repeating anti-Russian rhetoric would protect him from potential consequences. However, he now realizes he was mistaken. He has been sidelined, and the consequences are not only political but also territorial, economic, and military. Ukraine has lost key strategic regions, witnessed the collapse of its infrastructure, and expended resources that it may never recover. Russian offensives have displayed significant tactical superiority in areas like anti-air defense, reconnaissance operations, and the control of logistical nodes. The Russian military has demonstrated effectiveness that Western advisors have been unable to counter. Today, Russian flags fly where Ukrainian ones once stood. Russia's terms are non-negotiable, and the most surprising part is that countries like France and the United Kingdom are now acknowledging them. While they speak cautiously and diplomatically about these conditions, the message is clear: recognizing territories under Russian control signals the end of the war with a Ukrainian defeat. Moscow's approach has been highly effective, demonstrating that diplomacy is shaped by actions rather than statements. It has challenged the moralistic rhetoric of the West and highlighted its contradictions. Former supporters of Zelensky are now urging him to negotiate or surrender. He is caught in a difficult position. If he accepts Russia's terms, he risks losing the little domestic support he has left. If he rejects them, he could face the loss of international backing. France and the United Kingdom are no longer willing to support a government that does not promise concrete results. In summary, what appeared to be a strong alliance has crumbled, and what was once presented as a united front has turned into a series of desperate maneuvers. Zelensky, once a media figure celebrated in the West, now faces a grim reality, not from Russian forces, but due to the diminishing support from his allies. The path forward seems clear: no more major Ukrainian offensives or territorial recapture, only a slow process of accepting the situation. The narrative around Zelensky's struggle to maintain Ukraine's territorial integrity is quickly disintegrating. What was once support from Western nations like the United Kingdom and France is now dissipating. The demand from Moscow for territorial concessions and Ukraine's neutrality is being increasingly accepted by Ukraine's former backers. As the situation deteriorates, Zelensky is caught between his commitment to Ukraine and the growing pressure from the West to concede. The future of Ukraine now hangs in the balance, with the loss of key territories, economic decline, and a military worn down by years of conflict. Once united, the front has fractured, and as the world watches, Zelensky's options grow ever more limited. The question is no longer whether he will concede, but when and under what circumstances. The end of the conflict appears imminent, and the global community is preparing for its fallout.